So the topic we will be discussing today is a fascinating topic, and sometimes it is Nogeya Halocha Lemaisa. So after Makas Borod, when Parai pleased with Moshe, take this plague away and I'm going to be a good boy, and he wasn't a good boy even after it was over. Vani akshe es liboy. Vayomer el Moshe ketzeisius we have efrois es kape el Hashem. Rashi writes, ketzeisius eir min ha'ir, aval betoichu el Moshe lo ispala lefi shoisam elei gelulim. Moshe didn't want to daven in the city because the city is full of avodah zarah. And the Ramban brings the same in the name of the Mechilta. Mechilta is miyuchas to Rabbi Shmuel and is divrei Chazal. So obviously we learn from this pasuk, one should not daven where there are gelulim, that means avodah zarah. And this is a very common question, which I dealt with in different situations. One is, many hospitals belong to Christians. Presbyterian in New York is a very prestigious hospital, and many Jews go there on a steady basis. And usually, a hospital that belongs to Christians, it's not a church, it's a medical institution, but many times in every room there's a cross on the wall. And Jewish people go there. Jewish people go there for many reasons. Sometimes there are hospitals that specialize in a certain discipline in medicine. It's the best place to go. So a Jew finds himself in a room, and there's a cross on the wall. Could he bench? Could he say brachas? Could he daven? He's in the hospital. If you can't daven where there are gelulim, based on Rashi, based on this pasuk, what should he do? In many public spaces, primarily in airports and hospitals, in the big world, there are prayer and meditation rooms. People want to daven, people want to pray, and there are two different types of rooms. Sometimes there are no religious items there at all, and all there are is chairs and mats, because the Muslims pray kneeling on the floor on a mat, and besides chairs and mats and benches, there's nothing in there. But sometimes you have, on one hand, a Oren Kodesh with a Sefer Torah. Lahavdil, you have a cross and some prayer books that belong to different denominations. Could you daven there? So these questions have to do with Rashi. So let's have a look what the Psak Halacha is. Source number 2 is a Ramah. Simen Tzadik Dalet Siftes. Mishu bo v'derech v'usomach lamalon. אם יוכל להסתלק מן הדרך במקום שלא יפסיקו עברי דרוכים, יסתלק שם ולא יתפלל במלון שלא יבדיק רחובים. שלא יבלבלוהו בני הבייס. אבל אם אי אפשר לא להסתלק מן הדרך שלא יפסיקו, יספלל במלון בקרן זוויס. So this seems to be a strange halacha. Somebody is coming into a town, and it's almost the last moments to daven mincha, and he has two options. He could stop his car, or his horse, or his mule, whatever his means of transportation is, and stand in the middle of the road and daven. But then, people that are coming and going, yafsikuhu oivrei drochim. So if he could have a quiet and secluded place where nobody will bother him, better to daven in the middle of the way than to daven b'moloin. What's a moloin? Translated in modern Hebrew, it's a hotel. But we're not dealing with hotels, rather with an inn. You know, once in Europe, there were little inns in the way. But if he can't daven on the road, because people will just interfere, he couldn't daven with kavona, then he should daven in the moloin, and he should look for a corner, a quiet corner. Shelo yebalbeluhu b'nei habayis. Why is it preferable to daven on the way, in the middle of the road, and to daven in the moloin? And only if he can't find a quiet place, only then should he daven in the moloin. Why? So this Ramah is very short, but the source of the Ramah is Trumas Hadeshen. And in Trumas Hadeshen we see what the issue is. Let's have a look at the Shaila. Trumas Hadeshen is unique. These were not questions he was asked. He formulated the questions and the tshuvas. because he wanted to write Birurei Halacha, and he liked the style of questions and answers, Shalas Tshuvas. He made up the questions, and he wrote the Tshuvas. So what is the question? Misha bo bederach vayom ma'ariv, and the day is, it's almost before the Shkia. Shu eis litfilas mincha, v'areu korem l'maloin, le'ir shekol ha'noichrim, shiyochol ha'gier sham meboid yom godoyom, shaper tfei sheyamtin להתפלל עד כי יבוא למולוין, או יתפלל בסודה, כגון שיוכל להסתלק מן הדרך. What is it about? Let's have a look at the tshuva. Yearly. דאם יוכל להסתלק מן הדרוכם כל כך שכל עבדו ולגמרי שלא יבואו עוברי דרוכם ויפסיקו, if he's confident that he could find a quiet corner and nobody is going to bother him, shaper tfei להתפלל בדרך. Better to daven in the middle of the way. ממה שיספלל במולוין, בעיר שכל הנוחים, מפני שבעיר הרבה גלולים ובוטי תומי יש בו. וכמעט שאין מולוין שהוא בייס נוחי שלא תמוצא בו הרבה גילולים, מצוירים או חקוקים בקויסול, וגם לפעמים תויבויס ופסילים. ודור של רבשנו מיקרו זה, כצייסים מן העיר, לא רוצה להספלל בתוך מצרים, לפי שויסם עלי גלולים. That is what it's about. In the Moloin, they're going to be Avodah Zorah. So better daven outside in the street in the middle of the way. However, if you can't daven b'kavona because you're not going to find a quiet corner, better daven in the Moloin, in a corner. Why a corner? Not because of the Avodah Zorah. Shelo yebalbeluhu b'nei abayis. So this Tzum Sedeshin proves it's a lechatchila that you shouldn't daven where there is avodah zorah. But if you need to choose kavona or mokim gelulim is preferable. And that is why. If you can't find a quiet space on the road and you need to be confident that nobody is going to bother you, then better daven in the inn, even though the inn has avodah zorah. And if you do daven in the inn, try to find a corner. Shelo yebalbeluhu b'nei abayis. Would this solve our issue? I think, in a great extent, yes. So a person is in the hospital, yet he can't daven on the way. He has nowhere else to go. He's in a hospital bed. This is where he is. So he definitely couldn't daven. Mishnah Berurah Siv Koten Lamed, it's not on our sheet, but the same simon, Mishnah Berurah says, but if there's a cross on the Mizrach wall, even though lechatchila a person should daven facing Mizrach, no, you turn in another direction. It is preferable not to daven facing Mizrach, but you can't bow down and you can daven where there's a avodah zorah across your eyes. So if the cross is on the Mizrach, then face another direction, and you won't have the Maila of Mizrach, of Kivun Yerushalayim. Let's have a look, source number 4, the Magen Avraham. Keren Zovis, Shelo yebalbelu b'nei abayis, ve'ein lochesh legelulim, shekol tfilosim hoyso beyoros melayas gelolim. So the Magen Avraham seems to explain, why aren't we so makpid not to daven where there are artifacts or objects of avodah zorah, called tfilosim be'ir melayas gelolim, which is a shtickle pele, because Jews always daven in shuls, both the Knesses and both the Medoshes. There are no avodah zorah in shuls, and if you don't feel well, you're ill, you're sick, you can't go to shul, you daven at home. There are no avodah zorahs in my home. I think the argument of the Magen Avraham is Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to daven in the city because the city is full of avodah zorah. I never visited Eretz Mitzrayim, especially not Eretz Mitzrayim 3,500 years ago. Was there avodah zorah everywhere? Obviously, the Kpeda is in a city that is full of avodah zorah. You don't daven. So the Magen Avraham says, we can't be makbid not to daven in a city which is mole avodah zorah, because avodah zorah is everywhere, and therefore doesn't make much difference whether there's avodah zorah in your room or outside your room or outside in the street. Avodah zorah is everywhere, and therefore ein lochush kuli hai. So anyway, my psak is, if you're in a hospital and there's a cross on the wall, today there's a great deal of sensitivity. And I know I had a very personal friend who was a big tzaddik, and he passed away in a Christian hospital. And when he was in the room, especially when he wanted it down, they covered the cross with a towel, or sometimes they just put it off and put it into a corner. And people understand sensitivities, but not always. If there's a Christian in the same room, he will be very offended if you take the cross off the wall. So the solution is turn to another direction, like the Mishnah Brura says in this Siman. Could you daven in an airport in a room where there is the cross and an Oren Kodesh? The fact that there's an Oren Kodesh, ein bo kedei letayer et hasheretz. You should not daven in a room where there's any symbol of avodah zarah, because you're not in a hospital bed, and usually in an airport, just look around. You could find a quiet corner somewhere, and it is preferable not to daven in a room where there is a cross or other symbols of avodah zarah. A room that has nothing in it, just chairs and benches, you could daven. But it also has no kedushas beis hakneses. So there is no upside in davening there. And it's just like davening in any other quiet space. It's not a beis avodah zarah, but it also has no kedushas beis hakneses. And therefore it's just like any other quiet room. Question number 2. And this is also very, very common, Baruch Hashem. So in many areas, especially in America more than in Europe, which previously the dominant residency was Christian, and now the town becomes a Jewish town, and Jews buy buildings and structures that previously were churches or mosques, and we turn them into a shul. Is that legitimate? Gemara and Megillah, source number 5, Davavo Medalef, Vahoyo ke'elef b'Yehuda, Ele teatrois v'kirkesois shebe'edoim sha'atidim sor Yehuda lelamed behen Torah berabim. Theaters, I don't know, how do we translate tartiois v'karkesois? Well, based on the wording on the letters, we would say theaters and circuses, but not necessarily. Karkesois doesn't necessarily mean a circus, and teatrois doesn't necessarily mean a theater. Toises on the spot. Yesh meforshem botei avodas kerchovim umachana oisen tartichois loshen cherpo v'karkasos lotzloime beisakisa b'loshen orav. So, if these are botei avodas zorah, l'choreh, this proves it is legitimate to take what previously was a beis avodah zarah and turn it into a yeshiva. Shulchan Aruch, Kuf Nun Daled, Hilchos Beis HaKnesses, Neiros shel Shavesh shenasonam kuti la'avodas alilim v'kibon shamoshon unesonam oy mechoran liYisrael ose ladlikam bebeis HaKnesses. Candles that were donated to a church and that were used in the church, but big candles. And once upon a time, people didn't have that much means and money, so after the service was over, they put out the candles and they used them again and again. And then the Christians sold them to Jews. Could you use those candles? And Beis HaKnesses, Shulchan Aruch says no. What was previously used for avodah zarah cannot be used for a Beis HaKnesses. Why is that different than taking botei tartiois v'karkesois, which according to Toises are botei avodas kechovim, and turn them into a yeshiva? Mogen Avraham, source number 8, Kuf Nun Dalet Sivkot Yud Zayin, Hu adin lekol ner mitzvah. It should not be used for a mitzvah. Hu adin lekol milei de mitzvah. Ein oisem medover shenasa li'avodas zarah. Who was the Ra'im? Who knows? There are a few different forms that call themselves Ra'im, but this one is the Mizrahi. Who was the Mizrahi? He did not found the Mizrahi movement. He lived almost 500 years ago. Rabbeinu Eliyahu Mizrahi. He was a Talmud of the Shita Mekabetzes of Rebbe Tzalal Ashkenazi, one of the Choshev Poskim. Knesset Gdoila quotes the Ra'im, "Da'afilu nevad bebeis avodah zorah bekva mutar le'espalel b'toichoi." Even a place that was kva for avodah zorah, a church, you could daven there. So why would that be different than candles that were used for avodah zorah and you can't use them in a shul? Ve'efshe desvir elei de mechubar shayna. Mechubar ein nesa. Ve'afal gav de bayis dinoi ketolosh makol mokom dome le mechubar. So the Magen Avraham says, maybe a house is different than an object, the metaltalin, because it's mechubar l'karka einoi nesar. Comes along the Pri Megadim, quoting the Eliyahu Rabbah, Re'ei matel espalel b'toichoi, aval lases memeno besel neses kavua, moida de'oso. So it has a different interpretation, a different teretz on the kasha. If you can't use a candle, how could you use a church to daven? Eliyahu Rabbah says, you can't turn a church into a shul. It is only tefillah zarai. If the Christians no longer use this room, no longer serves as a sanctuary in a church, you could daven there, but only boifen ara. You can't turn it into a shul. But how would he explain the Gemara and Megillah that we learned just a few moments ago? Tartiyoes v'karkasuas shebe'edoim shasidin Sori Yehuda lalamed ben Torah berabim. Sori Yehuda lo ased lovoi is not arai. Would there be a difference between Torah and Tefillah? You can't daven there, but you could learn Torah. Not mistaver, because Botei Medrash have even a higher level of Kedusha than Botei Knesios. And Torah is now less important than Tefillah. So how would the Eliyahu Rabbah explain the Gemara in Megillah? Asidim lelamed ben Torah is arai till they build their own shuls? Nish mistaver. So maybe Eliyahu Rabbah says halacha is not kedivrei hatosis. It doesn't mean botei avodah zorah. Maybe it does mean theaters, circuses, Moshe v'leitzim, but not botei avodah zorah. So halacha l'maisa, I dealt with this so many times because Baruch Hashem, Yiddishkeit is growing. I visited Philadelphia a few weeks ago. I spent a weekend there, and I was told there are 30 shuls that in the past were conservative and reform temples, and today they are Orthodox shuls, 30. So a conservative temple, chas v'sholem, is not the same as a church. You know, they're wrong, but it's not a base of avodah zorah. So it would be different. But there are also so many churches that were transformed into shuls and yeshivas, and personally, I said many shiurim in these places. Okay, so when I come to give a shiur, it's not kva, it's arai. But, so our psak is, if you redo, it goes without saying, if there are any crosses or religious objects, those definitely need to be removed. And if you renovate a place, then we say, Ponam Chadoshes Ba'ulakan, and then everybody will agree that it's Mutar Lechatchila. And that is my Psak Halacha L'Maisa. So, Baruch Hashem, many places that were in the past houses of worship to different religions, and today have been turned into shuls. There are also many places in the United States that, to our dismay, were in the past shuls, and today they serve different things. And there are circumstances in which you could sell a shul, because if Jews no longer live in that place, then you could sell a shul, but the money needs to be dedicated to build another shul or another yeshiva or another makom kodesh, and lechatchila, it should not be sold to any other religion to serve for avodah zorah. So these are questions of modern times, you know, with the changing world. So First, we discussed the question of davening where there are objects of Avodah Zorah, and then could we take Botei Avodah Zorah and transform them into shuls? And the psak is, if we make a shinui, if we renovate the place and it was redone, does it need to be torn down and rebuilt? No. It's enough that if there are any substantial renovations, and then we say, Ponim Chadoshes Ba'ulakan, and I think it's not only a heter, it's even a mitzvah. It's even a mitzvah. So this week we read Parshas Va'era. And in Parshas Va'era, we find Daled Lishoines Shel Geula V'hoitzeisi V'hitzalti V'lokachti V'goalti V'lokachti Eschem Li La'am. Could I have a Chumash? Is there a Chumash available right here? So, because of these Daled Lishoines Shel Geula, Leila Seder, we have so many things that are for. First of all, Dalet Koises. And there are different interpretations than Lishonim. Why were Chazal Masaken Dalet Koises? And the most common reason that is quoted in all the Poskim is Dalet Koises are Keneged Dalet Lishonos Shel Geula. And it's not only Dalet Koises. And we have 4 kashas. And obviously, the number 4 has special significance, but I said that because of Daled Lishoines Shel Geula. So I want to share with you, first of all, a poshet pshat. What are these Daled Lishoines Shel Geula about? לכן אמר לבני ישראל אני השם, והויצאתי אסכם מתחת סבלס מצרים, והצלתי אסכם מעבודתם, וגואלתי אסכם בזרועי נטויה ישועות גדולים, ולקחתי אסכם לי לעם, והויסי לכם לאלוקים וידעתם, כי אני השם אלוקיכם ומויסי אסכם מתחת סבלס מצרים. Slavery is a very bad phenomenon. I understand most of the boys in yeshiva come from America, right? So anybody that went to elementary school in America knows something about slaves and free men, about the Emancipation Proclamation, about the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery, and then there was a big war between the North and the South, and what is so bad about slavery? It's bad on many levels. The most fundamental level is people were born to be free. People were born to decide the way they want to live. And the only avdus that should be upon people is Avdi Hashem. We are slaves and servants of a Kodesh Baruch Hu and of none other. So, taking away a person's freedom is bad. It's hard for people. A guy wants to get up in the morning and decide what he wants to eat, when he wants to eat, and where he wants to eat. What he wants to do, where he wants to do, and when he wants to do, and a slave doesn't have that liberty. That is the most fundamental. Number 2, avoides perach. The Torah says, "U'bachichu b'nei Yisrael lo yisil d'loi beforach." Slaves worked hard. They were exploited, and like a lemon, you squeeze out a lemon, every drop of juice you could get out of it. And that's what masters always did to slaves. And number 3, there is something in human nature, some basic cruelty, and a person that is your slave and you control him, and he is like your horse or your animal. Usually masters were very cruel to slaves, and that's why the Torah says, if you have one pillow, you give it to the Eved. You have one bed, you give it to the Eved. So those are the 3 levels of evil that are usually come together with slavery. And the Torah says that Kodesh Baruch Hu's promise is Minakoved Elakal. Number 1, The unneeded and unnecessary sevel and pain and torture and suffering, that will come to an end. And I will also salvage you from work. You shouldn't need to work hard. And I will free you, and you will be free people. Those are the first three. Number 4 is Velokachti eschem li la'am v'oyisi lochem le'elokim v'yadatem ki ani Hashem Elokeichem amoitziesem etachasiv lois mitzayim. So I once said a vertel, and it's in a Haggadah Shel Pesach Minchas Osher. I hope this year we'll have a new Haggadah, working on it very hard after more than a decade since the previous one was available. And I wrote a vertel. There's a difference between a vort and a vertel, and there's a difference between a pshat and a vort. So this is a vertel, not more, but it's a good one, a nice one, and an important one. Between the first kais and the second, you could drink whatever you want. Between the second and the third, we have Shulchan Aruch, we have a big Suda. Between 3 and 4, no eating, no drinking whatsoever. And why is that? Some Jews would be happy with 3 kaises. Kais number 4 doesn't really speak to them. Of course, some Jews don't like to work. We want to be free people. Number 4 doesn't have that much appeal to some of us, to our dismay. So many Jews would be happy to have 3 kaises instead of 4. And after the 3rd kais, they would prefer to go to bed. But the Torah comes to teach us, no. The first 3 are only an introduction to number 4. The real thing is number 4, and that's why between 1 and 2 you could make a hefsek, between 2 and 3 you could make a hefsek, but between the first 3 and number 4, no hefsek. Because the first 3 are only meant to lead us to number 4. And the Leilas say that it's all about ולוקחתי אסכם לי לעם והויסי לכם לאלוקים וידעתם כי אני השם אלוקיכם המויסי אסכם בתחסיב למצרים. That's the real objective, and that is where we're heading to, and that is the 4th kais. So Kodesh Baruch Hu promises Bnei Yisrael me'etz Mitzrayim, you will have no more needless suffering. ויצאתי אסכם בתחסיב למצרים ויצלתי אסכם אבידוסם. You would choose on your own where to work and how much to work and what to work. And you will be free people. V'goalti eschem. But remember, our goal is Velokachti eschem li la'am v'hoyisi lechem le'elokim v'yadatem ki ani Hashem Elokeichem amoitzi esem etachasiv l'smasayim. And then we have kais number 5, v'heveisi eschem. And we fill up the cup, and the minig is not to drink it. And we call that cup Kais Shel Eliyahu. So when we were little kids, we were told that Eliyahu comes in the middle of the night and he takes a sip. And we had to get up in the morning and check that kais, and we always noticed there are less wine than there was the night before. Who knows? So one person, instead of having a kais shel Eliyahu, he had a big bowl of potatoes, and he said, Eliyahu gets so much wine wherever he goes, I'll leave some potatoes for him, let him have a bite, and not only drink wine. And when he got up in the morning, he checked those potatoes, were there less than there were the night before, like wine. So why is it called kais shel Eliyahu? Eliyahu does not come in the middle of the night to drink wine. He doesn't come. It's kais shel Eliyahu because this kais is something we are still waiting for. We are still waiting for the Geula Shalema, for Kibbutz Goliyos Yisrael and Binyan Beis HaMikdash. And that is why we fill up the cup as an expression of hope and prayers and tefillah that B'Korah B'Yameinu we should be able to drink this cup like we drank the first 4. So Baruch Hashem, after 2,000 years, we have the zchus of coming back to Eretz Yisrael, which is huge, which is momentous, which is a dream of the ages. But it's not the Geula Shalema. We are reading Chumash Shemois, and the Ramban, in his introduction to Chumash Shemois, writes that Chumash Shemois is called Sefer HaGolus VaGeula. And the Ramban asks, only a very small part of Chumash Shemois deals with Golus and Geula. 3 Parshiyos. Shemois Ve'eraboy. And in Beshalach, we already sang the song of Shir Hayam. The Ramban says, no, that's a mistake. Geula, for us, is not personal freedom and not even national sovereignty. Ad asher el malas avoisom yashuvun. It is only when we come back to where our forefathers were, that is the Geula. And therefore, the entirety of Chumash Shemois is Sefer HaGolus VaGeula. The Geula wasn't over in Parshas Beshalach when we sang Shir Hayam. It wasn't even over in Parshas Yisro Mishpotim when we stood at Har Sinai and received the Torah. The Geula Shlema was only when we built the Mishkan and we were Zoiche to Ashros HaShechina. And the same goes to the Geula Shalema. It will only be fulfilled when we will be Zoiche to the Beis Mikdash HaShlishi and once again to Ashros HaShechina. And that is why Kos number 5, we fill the Kos, but we don't drink it. We still hope and we still daven that we will be Zoiche to V'heveisi Eschem, and the Kodesh Baruch will bring all Kibbutz Nitchei Yisrael, and we will be Zoiche to the Beis HaMikdash, of Volotzi and Goyal, Uloshovei Fesha B'Yankov, and we should be Zoiche to Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'mheru V'yomeinu Amen. Good Shabbos.